Last year I reviewed Shovel Knight. If you saw that review, and you should have, you'll know that I love that game. Anyone that enjoys video games needs to play Shovel Knight. It's the embodiment of giving something familiar, yet different, loads of love and care, and above all, it's a ton of fun. Shovel Knight has the right level of challenge and difficulty that all games should truly strive for, instead of just being ball-busting or hand-holding. So recently, Shovel Knight had some DLC in the form of Plague of Shadows. The crazy thing is, Plague of Shadows is 100% free, so long as you have a copy of Shovel Knight, of course. As it's free, Plague of Shadows can really only be judged on if it's worth your time or not, and surely more Shovel Knight can't be a bad thing, right? Plague of Shadows has you playing as Plague Knight, one of the many foes of Shovel Knight in the Order of No Quarter. While the events of Shovel Knight are going on, Plague Knight is also running his own scheme in an attempt to create the most powerful potion of all time. There's no getting around it. Plague Knight is a straight up bad guy, and this isn't a story about his redemption. Instead, you're going around killing your allies to harvest the ingredients for this potion. The story is one of the most interesting parts of Plague of Shadows. Everything you have to do is for the benefit of Plague Knight in his dastardly ways, and in no way helps anyone else. While Shovel Knight was a fairly light narrative, Plague of Shadows has a bit more of a story to tell. It's also interesting to see how the rest of the world reacts to Plague Knight as opposed to Shovel Knight. The town isn't so welcoming, which leads you to have to find your underground lair. The relics that you'd buy from Chester as Shovel Knight are now found by Plague Knight, who calls them useless and then proceeds to pawn them off to Chester in return for something more suited for Plague Knight himself. While it could have been an afterthought, the way that both stories wind up intertwining is a nice nod to those who enjoyed the first game. So because this is DLC of Shovel Knight, there isn't a whole lot more to say about the music and graphics. It's using all the same levels, art, and music from the main campaign. Plague of Shadows does add a few things though, mainly extra animations for Plague Knight, and a few new areas and characters. All of these look just as fantastic as the main game, and it never feels like it doesn't fit or was a second thought. The same goes with the music, with most of it being the same as before. Though certain tunes are more sinister than in the main title, namely the victory music. When Plague Knight defeats a boss, the tune that plays feels like you're contributing towards something darker, like the downfall of the world instead of its salvation. The biggest change, of course, is the character you play as and how they play. Plague Knight is completely different from Shovel Knight, as his arsenal is purely projectiles, gadgets, and spells. Plague Knight also has a triple jump that he must use to jump across gaps and to reach higher places. The bombs and jump can be customized a bit to allow different effects, which you'll need to do because Plague of Shadows is hard. Hard to the point that it unfortunately teeters on frustrating one too many times. The problem is that Plague of Shadows reuses the levels from Shovel Knight, while making small changes here and there, but the levels are essentially untouched. The pogo mechanic and the shovel's other moves were integrated quite well into each level. The problem is that, as I said before, all of Plague Knight's attacks are projectile based, meaning he doesn't have any attacks where he can bounce. This alone makes several instances of levels way harder than they need to be. You're constantly trying to get a grasp on how the triple jump will go, and right to the end I found myself having issues judging how far and how fast Plague Knight will fly. To make matters worse, Plague Knight feels much more slippery than Shovel Knight ever did, and although there are plenty of options to customize the bombs, there never felt like a combination that was right for the levels. The entire time I found myself fighting the design and skipping out on bonuses just because they were made so much harder by Plague Knight's infuriating triple jump. On the flip side, bosses are easy with Plague Knight for the same reasons that levels are hard. As the bosses were built with the shovel mechanic in mind, it's easy to just spam bombs at the boss you'll be fighting and watch them flail around. Coupled with the fact that you have healing potions and can unlock a gadget that gives you health every time damage is done to an enemy, which, I won't lie, is pretty cool, and most of the difficulty is just gone. And that's a shame, because Shovel Knight was able to blend the right amount of challenge and difficulty to make it so memorable. Plague Knight is just annoying to play as. He's an interesting character, sure, and the story did keep me going, but I found myself not having fun. And that was the most important part of Shovel Knight. It was pure, perfect fun. Plague of Shadows has some interesting ideas that I'd love to see with some better level design, but as it stands, I'm hard-pressed to really recommend giving it your time, even if you enjoyed the original Shovel Knight as much as I did. Sure, it doesn't cost anything, but is it really worth playing? I suppose if you can look past the issues with the execution, you might find some enjoyment in Plague of Shadows. It is worth trying if you already own Shovel Knight at the very least, just don't expect the same experience you got out of the original.